This video was made possible by these Patreon supporters.
Welcome back to my After Effects tutorial series. Last episode, we learned about one type of tracking, called point tracking. There are two others that I want to go over, and we will go over both of them in this episode. The first is 3D camera tracking. This is much more simple than you'd imagine, but even still, I'm only going to go over the very basic of how it works. Let's get our video that we originally had and place it into a new composition. Then, over in the right hand corner where we found the option to point track our coin, we are going to instead select this option that says track camera. What this is doing is analyzing the scene to find where the camera was in actual space and match the movements of the real camera to the movements of the camera in After Effects. It doesn't always work, and if it doesn't, you may need to find a different camera tracker, or you may need to try our second option. Anyways, it looks like it did actually work for us. So now what we need to do is select some of these points that it tracked and create a solid. There are obviously multiple options, but in our case we are making a solid so that we can see how well it tracked. Once we've created our solid, we should be able to move it over to our coin and place it on top of the coin. When we play the video, we can see that the square is actually sliding slightly. This isn't necessarily due to a bad track, but potentially due to where the square is in 3D space. It might be slightly above the coin, or slightly below it. Unfortunately, parallax is hard to nail down sometimes, especially with a scene as flat as this, so we'll just have to adjust using trial and error until we get our square directly onto the coin. Once we've done that, we are essentially done. If we want, we can bring in our other video we had and place that in our scene as well. You'll notice that, unlike the point tracker, the video doesn't always face the camera directly on. It shears and has perspective so that it looks like it belongs in the scene. There are definitely pros and cons to each of the two trackers. The trick is knowing when to use each one. Also, since we have already placed our camera in the scene, we can now get rid of our 3D camera track effect that is on our original video. However, if we decided that we wanted to delete our camera and start over, it might be better to keep it around so that we don't have to wait for it to track again. In our case, we're going to delete it since we are satisfied with our track. And that's it for camera tracking. Simple, right? If you want more, there are definitely resources on the internet that will be more in-depth, but this series is really only meant to show the tools that you have at your disposal so that you know what you are looking for when you're looking for a specific, more advanced tutorial elsewhere. Also, if you would like a more advanced series, leave a comment below on what, and I will try to go more in-depth on that subject, assuming I know it. Anyways, on to our last form of tracking, planar tracking. This is a form of tracking where you track a surface or plane in 3D space. In this case, a planar tracker is perfect because all we have is one big flat object minus our quarter, of course. So to do planar tracking, you need to select the object that you want to track, then move to the animation drop-down menu and select Track in Mocha AE. This is a simplified version of Mocha Pro, a very powerful planar tracker. In Mocha Pro, you can do everything you see here and more, but I'm going to assume that you haven't purchased Mocha Pro and are in fact working with the built-in one that comes with After Effects. So, when you click on Track in Mocha AE, you may be presented with a startup screen if you've never used it before. Follow the on-screen prompts, and you will arrive to this box. In most cases, you will want to leave all the settings the same. But in our case, we are going to change the name of this project to Quarter Track and change the results location. In some cases, you might also want to change which frames it is that you are tracking. In this case, we want to track all of it. When you click OK, you will be presented with an entirely new UI. To keep it simple, we will need to select an area that we want to track, then press the track button. So first, to select an area, we need either the B-spline tool, which works essentially like the pen tool in After Effects, or the X-spline tool, which is in some cases a little easier to use. I'm going to use the X-spline just to show you how it works. Clicking creates a point, and if we make a closed shape of any sort, we're given these pull tabs, which we can pull on to increase or decrease the sharpness of the corners. So, now that we've made our shape, we can click Show Planar Grid and the Show Planar Surface tools to make sure that our track lines up with our actual surface. It's a little pointless to do right now since we have a flat surface, but say you were tracking something at an angle. You could use the Planar Surface tool to make sure that the planar grid matched up with the angle of the actual surface. Now, we simply click the track button in the middle of the screen to track forward either one frame or continuously, much like how our point tracker works. Now that our track is done, we can export it back into AE by clicking Export Tracking Data and selecting the option that we want. There are multiple options here, and there are even more in Pro, and each has its own use. I highly suggest checking out Mocha's YouTube tutorial series if you want to learn more about how Mocha's tracker works and what it can do, because it can do some pretty powerful things that are well beyond the scope of this tutorial. So, we are going to select corner pin with motion blur, and then we're going to hit copy to clipboard. If we needed to save this track data or send it to somebody, we could also save it in a text file. Moving back over to AE, we can make a new solid and then apply that data to the object by simply pressing Ctrl-V, paste. What that does is it applies an effect called corner pin to our solid. And it's as though each corner of our object was pinned to the tracked scene below it. This version doesn't actually create a 3D camera, so you can't just start dropping in objects to the scene like you can with a 3D camera track. But that was really just a brief overview of Mocha. Mocha really can do so much more, but most of it is really far out of the scope of this tutorial series. So, that's that. Those are the 3 different camera trackers, as well as a bit on blend modes as well. There's really only one more video planned in this series, because by this point you should have enough to start learning anything specifically about what it is that you might want to do in After Effects. So, I hope you enjoyed. Leave any comments or questions you might have down below, and I will see you later, YouTube.